Hello, friends, and welcome to the Cornerstone Collective. My name is Jay Brown, and I'm your host. With me today is Angus McLeod,
Hey.
as well as Javan Brown.
Hello.
We're jumping right into the 7 C's of culture that we talk about here at Cornerstone, and those are commitment, community, communication, competence, creativity, compassion, and celebration. I want to start out today with a scripture from Galatians 5.
But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. Galatians 5:16.
Amen to that. Man, this past weekend, we were talking about our Pentecost series, and Angus, you brought a great word to us, man, about walking in the Spirit. You want to give a little bit of a rundown of that?
Yeah, it's the idea is kind of you on this journey. You can either walk it alone, you can walk it in your own power, or you can walk it with a traveling companion who wants to see you get to the final destination the best way possible.
Amen.
And man, I'll tell you, I've done it both ways. I've done it trying to will myself to be better and by my own strength, and it only lasts for a short period of time, and then you fall back into old ways. But when you have the Holy Spirit working in and through you and counseling you, you can go so much further, and lasting change stays. And ultimately, I think that's what helps you to fall in love with Jesus, with this idea of Holy Spirit just leading and guiding you.
Amen to that. No, it's such a powerful word too, man. So thanks for bringing that to us.
Yeah, thank you.
Had a lot of people say the same. That was their experience. You guys can go online, check it out. Have it on YouTube. You pull it up. It's on Facebook as well. And you actually can see these sermons, even if you're not close by to us in proximity. You can watch them live on Sundays. We have 2 different services we're doing and streaming those out. You can catch it on Facebook, on Instagram. You can do it on YouTube, even on TikTok. In fact, a lot of people in our TikTok community, like over 100 per service, that watch it just via TikTok, let alone YouTube and the others. So a couple hundred people watching it live on a Sunday, aside from what we have in the room. Pretty powerful.
Yeah, it's really cool. We were actually just talking about having a digital usher and what that means, which, however many years ago, that would have been just a wild idea. It's very cool to think about, having somebody there to be able to talk on the comments and respond back real time, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, absolutely. Another cool part about that is because we already have kind of people that host, but to have something very deliberate in that way is pretty awesome. Jabo, you got a chance to listen to Walk by the Spirit. What would you take?
No, it was really good. I appreciate it a lot with the message, and kind of going to where you're talking about for TikTok. It was awesome. Like me, Joel, and Jeremy were propped up in the production booth, and we were just seeing all the positive response on TikTok, and it was really cool to see that what had previously been a stream that maybe 5 or 10 people joined into had grown by 10 times the community, and now there was actually a consistent base of people that were coming back and watching stuff. And there was a TikTok salvation that happened too, which is really cool for this girl in Texas, I'm pretty sure. And she was kind of sad that she couldn't come actually visit us because of how far we are away in Arizona, but she it gave her hope to start looking again for a physical church to go to out there. So I thought it was really good.
Yeah, we want you to get tied in wherever you are. If you're not close to us, you're obviously welcome with us here and get tied in as part of the community. But if you're not, man, we want you to get tied into a church, be a part of that church and active in your faith. Living for God. Amen?
Amen.
Hey, part of the C's we talk about is our commitment to Christ. And so in doing that, we have been talking about what it means to be empowered by the Spirit, what it means to pray in the Spirit and have Holy Spirit praying through you. And so very much in line with that and believing for that. And we've been talking about what it has to mean to have the mind of Christ. So having the courage to live for God and also being those who are formed in the Spirit, seeing the fruit of the Spirit come off our lives, Galatians 5. It's a scripture we read, and a little bit later you'll see the fruit of the Spirit that are there. Angus, you want to do the dance for us? I'm just kidding for those that are listening. But that goes back, throwback to you guys, which is awesome. This is such a deep cut, but especially because the two of you are with us today. Gage is out as he's running his wife to the airport. We did online kids church during COVID. So this is 6 years ago. Yeah, we did online kids church, and the two of you were our hosts, hilariously. And now we're together on the podcast with each other. But the two of you were our hosts. So, Javan was the student host, and you were the main character for the thing. But we were actually doing the Fruit of the Spirit. Was one of our main online kids churches that we produced, however many episodes of it was. What was that like, man, learning all that stuff?
Well, actually, the song that we used and we played it every week during that series, it just lists the fruits of the Spirit, and that really helped to solidify it in my mind. So,
totally.
So now,
love,
joy,
peace, patience.
So that's kind of the beat and tempo that I recited out in because it just stuck so well. So I mean, however you need to digest the material. do so.
Make application for it. Absolutely. Java, you remember it. You were in all those videos. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty funny. Like, literally every time anybody reads Galatians 5, either 22 or 23, I always recite it in my head. Just like the music is instantly playing. I'm like, yeah. I don't even remember the dance anymore. I know if you asked Shiloh and Amelia to come in, they got it unlocked. Immediately they would do it.
Yeah.
Or especially Shiloh. Like, she was huge about
Amelia
it.
Amelia too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll say this was crazy. So the other day I came home. Now our kids are on break. Amelia is Javen's littlest sister, youngest sister, and she was in the videos. She was really young. Angus's kids were in the videos too, and that's like her best friend. Quinn, is their Quinn, and so they're all in the videos together too. But Faith's in the videos. Everybody's in the videos. They're all. I mean, looking at a young Gavin and Shiloh was hilarious because they were like preteens or whatever. Now they're in high school. Driving stuff like that. It's crazy, man. Javen's an adult, so it's like wild to see this, but it's cool like to see and go back. But Amelia, I walked in the house. Amelia is watching it. She's watching the old playlist, which is somewhere like on our YouTube, buried in some list somewhere. And so she finds these old videos, and dude, it was great. I was watching you two of you guys. It was awesome, dude. We watched a bunch of videos. I'm like, I gotta put this on hide. She goes, "Don't do it. Don't you dare." I was like, all right, girl, we'll leave it out there so you can watch them. Well, it was pretty fun, man. But yeah, fruit of the Spirit and having the mind of Christ. We talk about often how we don't have anxiety of the things of the world. We're going to give it to the Lord, but we do talk about some of these things because we interact with our faith and culture. It is important that we understand what's being said around us and understand how we respond as Christ followers. So a little bit of putting on your tinfoil hat today as we continue in some of these topics that have been brought up in popular culture by the government, no less, which is insane. And it starts here with the UFO release by the government. Now, if you haven't been staying up to date with this, we've been talking about it the last couple episodes. That the U.S. government released by the CIA a series of previously classified documents that are saying that there is extraterrestrial life here on Earth, that there are aliens, that there are crafts that have crashed, and they were releasing all these UAP videos. And in fact, some people even saying what types of aliens there are. Man, what's that been like for if you guys have seen more and more of these videos released? Have you got a chance to see some of those videos, some of those lights in the sky?
Yeah, well, I haven't seen any of the lights in the sky, but I've listened to some other podcasts and different things where it's talking about just some of the technology, some of the things that we're seeing, like the orbs and stuff, and how it can be used potentially in the Great Deception and things like that. When it talks about fire falling from the sky and things like that, we have lightning in a jar, and so they can create plasma balls that fall down. And so there's a lot of stuff that, with all of this, I think that, our first response is to go, oh, that's stupid,
of course,
and poo-poo it and dismiss it. But I really think that it's something that we shouldn't spend all of our time on, but we should be aware of, because, as these things unfold, as it is rolled out, it says in the Bible that there's going to be, with this great deception, there's going to be a lot of people who fall away. And that means that you have to be on the path in order to fall away. So that means the believers. And so I think that it's important for us to be aware of what's going on, so that as we see these things develop, we go, okay, yeah, this is exactly what the Lord was talking about, so that we don't fall victim to what it is that everybody's saying and seeing.
That's a really good point. Javen, what's your take on it, man?
Yeah, I mean, kind of like to Angus's point with a great deception idea, there's a lot of talk about Project Bluebeam and things like that. Right. And a bunch of this kind of just aligns with what that is. If like the government,
what that is, Bluebeam.
Project Bluebeam, it's basically just the idea that there's like a government entity out there that is intentionally trying to create a simulation that's going to be like this big grandiose event where they almost simulate a godlike figure in the sky that like has some revelation for people, whether it looks like an image of Christ, image of Buddha, image of like Muhammad, or like what they were portrayed to be, Allah, whatever it would be. Someone that comes back and gives like a great revelation to people. They'll have like a bunch of massive speakers and like a huge audiovisual setup for it, or at least that's the ongoing and onworking theory behind it. But it would definitely make sense with what's being seen, at least for a lot of the recording sightings of like UAPs, and the fact that it's all being very public now. I think definitely it's worth asking questions why this is all kind of being made public now, especially right after the Epstein files and a lot of other really important documents coming out, whether this is like cover up for that, or if this is all kind of just following into some series of domino events that like all eventually lead to one conclusion, and then they're trying to like simulate a war or something like that, or at least provoke the world to react a certain way.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see these things tied together like this, because as people talking about this, and that's why I said tinfoil hats, because this is all very much conspiracy type stuff, but they're saying that that's kind of what they want to depict. It makes me think of, Angus, all the way back, man, Monty Python, Search for the Holy Grail, God appearing in the sky, he's cartoon, right? But he peels up, he's got the beard and the thing and the crown. Yeah. And he's talking to everybody. Yeah. What do you think, man?
I think it'll look a little bit better than it did back in the early 70s or late 70s. But, I think it's kind of that idea that if you see your deity or representation of your deity, it's one thing to accept things on faith. It's a whole other thing to go against what you see.
That's true. Yeah.
And what you are potentially hearing and all of that stuff. And so again, that's why we have to be on guard and aware and awake to all these things.
Absolutely. Last week, we also talked about how there are numbers of people are releasing different types of aliens. We talked about what they say, and they're saying that these are scientists that say they've worked on it or they're interacted with them. And so they're saying all this stuff that's kind of been in popular movies and all this stuff. They're saying it's real, saying it's valid, which is, to my heart, it says it's a deception spiritually. I think all these things are spiritual beings. There's we know that very clearly. That's in the Bible, talking about these other beings that exist. And I think that's the deception that's being used. They're trying to say that it's another world and validate who they are, not to make it a spiritual thing here. And I think that's going to be part of the cloaking, along with what Javan was saying with Bluebeam. I think that exactly is where that thing comes into alignment and what that might look like. So be very, very interesting. Javo, you know about David Dobrick and about the crew that's there from online. Some of the YouTube stuff, they're pretty big in that space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a little bit.
And there's a guy that's part of his crew or was kind of adjacent to that group called Big Nick. Mm-hmm. You had a chance to see that video. He was talking about what it means because he grew up Hindu. He grew up like tied to yoga and a bunch of other stuff. He's come to Christ and has very much been very vocal about that. Very interesting to see him in this light. He was kind of known as like a very, very heavy party guy and like real crazy. Now having a complete shift and now talking about spiritual stuff like yoga being yoked to spiritual things. Which one you're taking on that?
I mean, I haven't actually seen the original video on it, but I know as far as my conversation with you, it sounded basically a lot like what Angus was telling us or has told us across a bunch of these podcast episodes about yoga. And I think he's probably better qualified to speak on it than me, but it is interesting to kind of see that consistency of a narrative from actual people and people that practice Hinduism and things like that, affirming what Angus and other people have said for a long time. And kind of how the Western world still turns a blind eye to it. So,
also, what's interesting about that, and we'll go back to you, Javo, about this. He was also talking about how a lot of times the Western church doesn't understand spiritual attack that's going on, and so people will think something is like spiritually from God, reacting, especially in charismatic churches like ours, and saying, "Oh, but people don't recognize that's actually a spirit that's doing that." And I don't mean like someone falling out under the power of God. We see that, and that's within Pentecostal circles a very normal thing. He's talking about like writhing on the floor, like doing all these other things. Like, no, we see that as spiritual and not good. But he's saying, there's some churches out there that they see that as, oh, it's the power of God working in you. Angus, what's your take on that?
Yeah, this is, again, one of those areas that as time progresses, you hear more and more about it. So like with the yoga, it was one of those things that the Lord had answered a question for me after years of seeking. And then I thought, well, maybe I'm just a lone nut or whatever. And since then, there've been a lot of people across a lot of different spaces, including the missionary that we were with in Nepal.
Right.
That was one of my biggest confirmations. Where she's like, no, this is absolutely what we see.
Right.
But going back to that missionary, she had a girl that came to live with her and had been used as a vessel by one of the yogis and had just tons of demons within her. And they had cast out a lot of these things, but there was one that it was like a spirit of prophecy.
Right.
And so when people would come into the house, this girl would be able to identify various things that were in their luggage or whatever, and she thought it was kind of neat.
Right.
Because she felt like it was giving her warning, and what she didn't even realize when somebody else came from outside and saw that, she's like, don't you realize that's from the enemy?
Right.
And this is somebody who sees spiritual activity all the time.
Right.
And it really hit me as how deceptive it can be.
Right.
Because again, we know that the enemy has been around since the beginning and is a master at copying and twisting things. And so these demons can come and masquerade as an angel of light and things like that. And so it is very important. And we're starting to hear that again across a lot of different spaces with people who are coming out of witchcraft and stuff, how important it is for us to test every spirit and know that this is, whether this is from God or not. Because if you start following or believing in a work of what you think is the Holy Spirit, you could end up in a really bad place because it just takes you away one step at a time.
Yeah.
And they talk about how there's a lot of people who end up in these really weird spaces because they've fallen victim to, or they've subscribed to some of these works of the enemy, thinking it's a work of God. And so that's why, again, we have to be just very aware of what we're doing. We have to be able to get confirmation from other people and things like that, because man, that's a scary idea that as a Christ follower, we could end up being a cheerleader for the other side and praying stuff onto other people unintentionally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because these things being tied together, and how Nick's talking about that from his perspective. Obviously, he's like us; he's another Christ follower. So, but he's talking about his story, using his testimony for God, and saying, these are the things that he sees in his life and what he's experienced. And so, it's very insightful that we need to be very much aware that the spiritual ramifications of these things that we're like, it's kind of innocuous, it does whatever. It's like, no, there's something to this. There's something important here.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Lord help us. Hey, one of the interesting things that we've been talking about is about our interaction with the world and how we live for Christ. We've been talking about church planting and even working with missionaries around the world. One of those places that we went and planted the church was in Paris, France. Recently, Paris Saint-Germain, which is the team that's there in Paris, a soccer team, they won what's called the Champions League. It is the premier trophy for Europe, and it's where all the clubs in Europe, which is the biggest soccer fandom, is all the clubs in Europe, the people who win their individual countries, so the clubs within that country as they play against each other for their title, they are put into a larger tournament with all of Europe, and then they play together to get to this Champions League trophy. PSG won it, second year in a row, back-to-back.
Yes,
Happens
sir.
to be my team and Javen's team. We
Yes,
support
sir.
PSG. Allez, PSG. So pumped for that. But what's crazy about it is what's been reported on the back end. Obviously, from the sports side, we're excited. It's our team. We win something. Yeah, it's good. Get some silverware. But what's crazy is what happened in the city afterwards. And we've been seeing this happen in Paris from time to time. There's like surges of this happening. But most recently, it's been even more so. Before we moved to Paris in 2010 to plant the Bridge International Church, which still exists today, shout out to the Bridge International Church, very much love that community of faith. As we were part of a team that planted that church, we knew that it was coming in on the heels of a lot of this same kind of stuff. They've been rioting in the city. It was the 2008 crash. It was all the job loss and all the things that were happening. And the youth in the city were kind of a powder keg ready to go off. And now we didn't have any Champions League thing. There were no trophies to win. The PSG was not good until years later. So, we were fans of them way back then, kind of from 2007. But it's one of these things where, we're kind of like seeing what's going on and happening. And then suddenly, man, this is a really big how much France has shifted away from its values before, being very artistic driven about the beauty of the city and stuff. Instead, man, they're at the win. To celebrate the win, people are rioting in the streets and burning stuff down. Crazy. Javen, what's your take, man? You saw some of this.
Yeah, I mean, it is 100% sad, because even though there's been a lot of like finger pointing at who's been doing a lot of this, it still is kind of an underlying issue that's been consistent for the French populace as a whole. Not saying it is entirely one group of people, but it is definitely accelerated by issues of immigration that have kind of been going on in France. And I think what's interesting about this is it serves as a perfect example to all of these Western nations that are kind of being really liberal with their immigration policies, us included, that if you continue to let people in who kind of refuse to assimilate with the ongoing culture around and then implement their own version of what they believe to be morality upon everybody else, and then guise that underneath the idea of what it means to be included and the fact that this is accepting of everybody and whatever else they want to say, then inevitably you kill your country, because if stuff like this continues to go on, there's no country left for you to even rule.
Right.
So this is kind of what's also been happening a lot within the UK, and this has been a really big problem for people within the UK, especially from a political standpoint, because they feel like the actual voice of the British people are being minimized. Same thing's happening in France because of how many Syrian, North African refugees they have that they've just continued to allow to come in. And then for us, obviously, we accept literally everybody, so it's kind of the same thing. Whereas you look more towards Eastern Europe, and they're completely like shutting off their borders from people even getting in. Like I think Poland has refused to take any Muslim immigrants whatsoever because they've looked at the numbers of ongoing countries around them of Muslim immigrants coming in, as far as like certain crimes
like
and
refugees
certain
style.
exactly
Yeah, you're saying refugees.
certain crimes and certain kind of crowds that follow them, and they're like, yeah, we're not doing that at all. We'll take these other people because they've continued to do good for us, but as far as our immigration policies, we're shutting them off completely. And it's funny because the Western world's condemning things for that happening, but then you look towards Poland and they continue to remain a perfectly fine country. So a lot of this is like kind of more about political problems than it is about a lot of other things, but it is a constant reminder kind of like this line that we need to dance around.
It is interesting too because in Paris, there were 2 people that died from the clashes. There was over 220 people were injured. I think they had 22,000 police officers they released to put the peace back together.
Yeah.
Over 500 people were arrested. They had 264 vehicles set on fire. I mean, the city, which is supposed to be the city of lights, beauty, and art and flowers, was burning. Man, it was on fire. And for a terrible reason, because they're celebrating something good. I mean, literally right on the tail of this, now they got it all cleaned up really fast because at the Eiffel Tower where some of the stuff was happening, like within a day, they actually had the main PSG, like celebration with the team and all the banners and all stuff. And it was really beautiful and really awesome. But some of this other stuff that was happening is really coming from, as Javan put it, like from a subset of people that are troublemaking, doing some other things. And it does become problematic because the culture doesn't connect. So the values that they have of order and beauty and all this other stuff, that's not what the younger ones coming from other places are doing. They're coming from countries that do not have that development, do not have that background. And obviously we're for people from everywhere. We're for them, full stop. But it doesn't mean that they don't need to change their culture. If the culture crashed the country they're coming from, and then now they want to come to a country that is established and crash that one, that's no good, man.
No, exactly.
Doesn't matter where you're from. And as people that have lived around the world, I've lived in Mexico, I've lived in France, I've lived in Egypt, we've traveled, 70 plus countries and been all over. The thing that you see is that your culture very much has a big driver. And we love the beauty of the culture that makes it diverse. I think that's wonderful. It brings good food and clothes and music and cool stuff. But if your culture also now is saying, okay, my values to tear things down are more important than your values to keep it safe, that's not legit. And I think that's where countries like Germany, countries like Sweden, they're fed up, man. They're like, we're done with this. So they ran the metrics and found that it was these people were supposed to be refugees. You're supposed to be helping them. They're coming in and saying, no, they're actually the source of whatever, 85% of the crime that's happening. Really crazy it's happening, including, the German government, which just passed a law on this, was saying to Syria, you need to take back your people now that you're in peace. And they're like, no, we're not taking anybody back. Which is like a whole nother thing. Yeah. So it means that, there is some real shifts that these countries are going to have to take, because it's not going to be the ones that we knew from yesteryear. And I don't mean demographically as like what the color of the people are. I mean who they are as what they are as an entity. They're no longer going to be, as Javan's wearing a French football kit today, it's not going to be the team that's there. And so, and that team, is made up of people that are, African people that are there, but they're part of the culture, part of the community, all those other things. They're not doing and tearing this stuff down. So, man, it makes it really tough.
Yeah,
Angus, what's your take, man?
I think cultural identity and all of that is really important, but it also speaks to just kind of mob mentality, group dynamics, and all of that.
That's true.
That we have to remember that you can be a part of the group, but you still have to be an independent thinker and all of that. And you can't allow yourself to be swept up in these kinds of things. It's so sad that something that is meant to be a celebration ends up with death and destruction and all of this. And it just, with these kinds of things, it makes me think of the larger situation where as we are pushed forward and as different things make certain groups angry, all it takes is just one match to set the whole powder keg on.
100%.
Yeah, that's true.
And so again, that's why we have to be, especially as believers, you can be angry, but don't sin, and so like you can see things that are not going on, but if you join the mob mentality, you're not doing anything to help out. We have to stay rational, and we have to be able to speak to these things in a way that comes against that violence and anger and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you and I were in the truck today. We were running and doing an errand and picking up a washer because ours died here at the church, and we use it every day for daycare, a bunch of stuff. So we're grabbing that, and Angus was talking about on Sunday, telling his own testimony about how the Lord helped him to overcome dealing with anger in a big way. And I told him, I was like, man, I'm super convicted, man, because in the recent couple weeks that has been fired up, man. I don't know why.
Yeah.
And it's definitely the Lord being like, you got to deal with this. Like, there's the root of something here you've allowed to get back in, because I'd really had that when I was a young man, you know, just would fight people. It was just crazy. It was just like very angry. And it was an internal anger. It wasn't like I was mad at XYZ. And I think that's the situation with these guys, these young guys, is that they're mad at their circumstance. They're mad at everything. They're mad at feeling like an outsider. And it's like, it's setting them off, man. And so this is the problem, is that if your culture encourages that to react in a certain way, well, then you're just going to set it up for something to really pop off. So, you know, I feel like everybody needs to go and hear your sermon for Sunday.
Well, I think
about
that
dealing with their anger.
I think this is how the Lord uses the summer in Phoenix, is, you know, as the temperature rises,
To
you
cook
know,
it through.
people start getting hot, especially if your AC is out or anything like that. It gets so much easier to get angry. And so that's one thing that I've noticed just over the past few years, is that when the temperature starts to go up, man, people get shorter in traffic. You hear more horns in traffic and all of this. And so I think that that's one of those, it can be one of those tools that the Lord uses, you know, in that heat. When it climbs, you go, oh, okay, maybe well, because it's easier to be cool when it's cool out, but it's not so easy to stay cool when it's so hot out.
For sure.
Ramadan in Egypt,
That was thinking the exact same thing, man. So you want to explain it?
Oh, yeah. So in Egypt, when we were there, at least from the span of, it was like 2015 to 2019, pretty much every Ramadan period we had was, I would say, like late April to like sometime in early June. It was really late for some reason. Whereas recently it's been a lot more pushed towards.
So it moves through the Gregorian calendar. It moves through it because it's a lunar calendar. So it's going off of a certain number of things, and then that's how they do their fasting.
I think the math is it changes by like 2 or 3 weeks every year. So I think it's been pushing up over these last few years. That's why it's more towards like a winter period. Yeah. So it's really nice for them this year. But dude, when we were there, especially in Cairo, just because I think you were explaining this to somebody recently, because everything's trapped in the concrete and it's so smoggy and dense over there, you can just feel it. It's like an absolute heat blanket just covering over everything. So people are just fired up. And because they're not eating anything from like, if it's in the summer, they're pretty much going from like 5:30 in the morning to like 8 p.m. without getting any food. Yep. And they are just mad at everything. So traffic accidents are like cause a whole bunch of fights and like dispersions between people. And then the minute that somebody like gets an order wrong or something like that, it's not a good look at all.
People are popping off, yelling, fighting in traffic.
Yeah.
We had, there's all these memes, like obviously we were connected with we had a ton of friends there, and we connected with all the local people and stuff. And then people be sending memes and stuff, you know, during their fasting, they're supposed to be drawing near to God. And then you have all these people dealing with their anger and super mad and stuff. And it's like me trying to keep all the bad thoughts and anger out of my head during Ramadan. And it was a person who had a normal head on the front, and the back of their head was gigantic, like an alien head or something. It made me laugh so hard. I was like, that's very funny. And we had Javan's grandfather, Angel, shout out Angel. We had him with us in Cairo. They came to visit. And I was remarking to him, I was like, you know, it's interesting. We haven't really seen that much fighting while you've been here. I literally said the words out of my mouth, and I was we were in a taxi, sorry. And I'm on the left side behind the driver. He's on the other side of the passenger. We're in the back seat, obviously. And as I say that, we pull up. We're right by the American University in Cairo, and we're going back towards our flat. We had to go around. There's tons of traffic. It just takes forever to get anywhere. And we're going around. Some people decided that they weren't going to turn right as they were in the turn lane, and they decided wanted to cut in front of everybody. Well, and no one was letting them go. So the guys behind them that were turning were mad. They're honking. These guys get out of their car, 2 guys in front. Well, they picked the wrong car because there's 4 guys in the car behind them. And here's the deal. It's right by the university. There are thousands of people everywhere, and they're walking around. Dude, I say the words, this thing, bah, 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 bah. They get out. We can't go either. We're locked in. Dude, they start throwing hands. So there's 6 people fist fighting. Now the people on the side of the road, they get involved. Now they're in the fight. There's like 10 people fighting. And he's like, It was like a movie. I said it. I was like, can't believe they're in a fighting. Boom, boom, boom. Everyone starts fighting, and then the lights go, and I tell our guy, I was like, go, 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 go. So he gets out of there because that, the way it works in a lot of these places that they're like, everyone's beat up. Well, there's a foreigner. They're going to pay for it. You know what I mean? They would pull us and do it somehow. I'm like, no. We're not doing that. So we get out of there. He was like, that was crazy. I was like, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's mental, man. People fight it out, going crazy. So
I've thought about fighting at Costco during the summer months.
Dude,
praise God that I have
the Lord. Yeah, Javen didn't see me be angry yesterday or anything like that. We were driving around in LA and Palm Springs. Yeah, he's looking at like, no, you weren't angry. No. I even told him, I was like, dude, I'm dealing with my anger right now. trying to
be more like Jesus.
Yeah, I didn't yell at anybody. Didn't do any of those things. Just needed some time. Thanks be to God. The Lord help us, man. We all fall short. But, as we talk about the cultural stuff and changes with culture clashing, that's why, as people who, our culture is even different than the culture of our community. Our culture is going to be one tied to Christ. And it is tying back to, the fruit of the Spirit. So the fruit of the Spirit is going to be inside of us. Obviously, we're not going to be out the ones running around, lighting stuff on fire and breaking down our own city. That's a mental thing. It doesn't make any sense. Why would you break down your own house? That's insane. But, when you're mad, you don't do things that are logical. You were talking about how many holes in the wall you needed to fix when you were a young man.
Yeah.
That's clearly because you've punched holes into the wall.
Yep.
And so I think all of us, we understand you're not thinking rationally when you're angry. So Lord, help us, man, to deal with our anger, do it right, and to be those that support others as they try to walk that process out so we don't have this kind of stuff, and that we can see these people, because it doesn't matter their background, man. Who cares? Every person has value. It's the culture. We want to see that culture change inside of them so that they can live more triumphantly after those things. Yeah. Hey, one of the things we talk about is our faith is fasting and prayer. So a very interesting report, and I know it wasn't recent because I actually saw part of an interview, but Kevin James, the actor, kind of known most famously for his show King of Queens, and then later Paul Blart Mall Cop and some other movies that he's in, all these other comedy movies kind of along with Adam Sandler's crew. He talked about in an interview where they brought up that he had fasted for 40 days, and he actually did a 40-day fast, and he did so praying for his daughter's health. I think she was going through a really difficult season. I just thought that was interesting. He's a really big guy. Like, he's broad shoulders, kind of more of a bulkier frame. And so, think about him fasting being a significantly different thing than somebody who's, built like a stick, as somebody who probably requires a lot more food because he's a big guy. Angus, you've done some fasting, stuff like that. Were you interested or surprised to see that Kevin James had done that?
Yeah, I didn't realize that was kind of where he was at in his walk. I don't know exactly what faith system he belongs to, and that's really not important either. But I didn't realize that he was kind of on that path. And in reading about it, what was interesting is he said he didn't start out to do it for 40 days. That it was just one of these things that he realized that he was absolutely powerless in his daughter's situation. And so that his wife said, we need to fast and pray. And so he started to fast and pray. And it was really hard for him because he didn't set a time that he was going to do that. But every day that he was getting ready to quit, his daughter would just say, man, I slept so good last night. And so that would push him one more day. And so it was just really cool to see that, that kind of a sacrifice that you'd make, because I love food, and,
same.
But to see that this was more important, and that's really what it gets down to. And that's what fasting does. It says that the result, the heart, the communication, the relationship that I want with God is more important than any of these other things. And it's really cool to see somebody of notability do something like that. And to do it for somebody else. It wasn't necessarily for selfish gain, help me get this part or help me to do this or that, because, we also know that fasting is not twisting God's arm. It's not,
correct,
it's not a way of rubbing God's lamp so that you can get whatever you want from him.
Correct. Yeah.
But he was just, from the right heart, I believe that it was like, I can't do anything. And so, Lord, I'm going to turn this over to you, knowing that you can do something. And I think that that's really powerful. Yeah,
that was amazing. It just really spoke to me. I was like, man, this is cool that, somebody's going and doing this, and he did it for a reason, because he, obviously as a dad, he loves his daughter, and I can relate. It's like, man, you do lots of things for your kids that you wouldn't even maybe do for yourself. You're willing to do for them. So, and I love that. So the Lord be praised, man. Let it be an example to us.
Yeah. Amen.
one of the things we've been talking about here is about spirituality, and about especially that with people that are popular in the media. Some of those that we've seen recently, we've been talking about how there's witchcraft that we've seen throughout pop music, and especially in some of these ones like Taylor Swift. One of the people that we had talked about before, we see this imagery in their music videos, was Ariana Grande. I saw this clip, and it was an interview clip of her out of her own mouth saying that she's someone who sees themselves very much as a witch, and doing these incantations and spells and power. Man, very interesting. Java, what do you think?
I mean, I feel like for a lot of this, it's kind of just affirmation of what has really been going on behind the scenes for a lot of female stars, because I think I saw a comparison video the other day that was like the 2016 version of a lot of these really popular female pop singers, and then like the 26 version. And a lot of them just look like they've gone through either some crazy like physical transformation, or that they're like almost the life that they had back in them in like 2016 is like taken from them.
Yeah, a lot of them are anorexic.
Exactly,
looking.
yeah.
So
it's super weird. It's like, and the fact that it happens to a lot of people in this sphere, but nobody was really asking questions for a while, kind of raises a question in and of itself. But yeah, like now a lot of people are just being super open with what they're doing. And I think a lot of it also stems from kind of the community of people that she's around as well. Like, even though what they did with Wicked was like pretty harmless as far as like what it goes, like the narrative behind it, I forget what the name of the other person that does it is, but the lady that like has no hair and like the long hair, like visually you can kind of arrive to a point in understanding why being around somebody for that long, and also being super close on a personal level,
would
also
vocal about
exactly
her participating
would
in
also
things.
bring you to that level as well. And also just all the stuff that's surrounding people like that within the community, even references to Taylor Swift having that in her music video and stuff like that. I mean, this is really just affirmation of what we've seen in the music industry for a very long time. But the fact that it's female pop singers that are doing this and kind of disguising it with like these messages of feminism and being like pro-choice and everything like that, is really interesting, because it's like the guise of like a Jezebel or like, something like that. So it's interesting.
Alongside that, we've been talking about other people that are kind of popular in the media. One of those is that's kind of come to notoriety after the fact, more for her son than herself, is May Musk, which is Elon Musk's mom. She's been someone who's a lot of photography, a lot into fashion and art and a bunch of other things that were in her purview. Lots of the pictures of her doing the Egyptian eye, a lot of that with the eye like this, or the cover of the eye kind of a thing, a lot of those kind of things going on. But very much like had people who were right around her, real close to her, said that she was active in summoning spirits and doing these kind of things. Angus, you had a chance to check that out?
Yeah, there's been a lot of interviews and different things that I've seen, like I said before, or mentioned before, with these ex-witches, people who are coming out of witchcraft, and and it doesn't necessarily have to be females. There are men who are in witchcraft and different things like that. It may have a different terminology, but it's the same thing, And just it's really insightful to see that just the mixture and the thought process, because we tend to think of, pointy hats and broomsticks and all that and doing really nefarious things. But the reality is, in hearing from a lot of these sources and people who are in it, a lot of them don't get into it with malice, and they don't get in with bad intent. It's really because they see that there's power there, and so they desire to use that power for good, and then they end up, once they've been bought in hook, line, and sinker, then they realize, wait a minute, this isn't what I thought I was signing on for.
Right, sure.
And so there's a lot of people who just they'll mix their Christianity with witchcraft and different things like that, and again end up in a place where they think they're doing good, and it's nothing like what they intended. And so again, it goes back to why we have to test all the spirits and really know where we're centered. But I think that with a lot of these people who are in the public space, it's just desensitization, and it's getting people familiar with and be like, oh, well, I remember my sisters wanted to be mermaids back when Little Mermaid came out and all that stuff. And so you see this life that you think is great and all of that, and you think, well, I want that, and if that's the path that they chose, then maybe it's a path for me. And I think it's just some of these people are used as a bridge for other people to get into it, and it can be really scary if you have no form of discernment or any way to guard against it, because from these other people, it's amazing how quickly you can get sucked into these things.
Yeah, it's like a testimony in a negative sense. Like the power of the testimony is still the power of the testimony, but in a negative way. And so it's interesting to see. It doesn't say anything about Elon or about him necessarily from this, but there are accusations about him, but he has never said anything about being a person of faith. I know he's even like attended church and some other things is more in recent. But it is very interesting as far as you start to see the influences of a person like that. And what that looks like, and forever he was kind of like, I don't even believe there's anything. I believe that we're in a simulation and other stuff. And he was like, we need to get off this planet before this planet blows up. We need to make sure we're cool. I'm like, man, this guy's thinking in a different scope. Obviously, everyone agrees that he's a genius and has lots to offer in that way. But very insightful to see some of these people and kind of what they're tied to. And so it's very interesting from that perspective. One of the Christian kind of media influencers is Bryce Crawford. We talked about him and how he's used his testimony for God. Recently just graduated from Liberty University, so congrats to him. And I know did he just get married as well?
Yeah, he got married like a few months ago, I think.
So just got married as well, so congrats on that front as well. He's been someone who, has embraced lots and lots of people on the street, had lots of talks with lots of different people from different walks of life. And so that's been really interesting. One of the people he just recently interviewed was actually Tristan Tate. That's Andrew Tate's brother. Andrew Tate being a very controversial kind of red pill personality on the internet, someone who's so much so that kind of the woke version of YouTube back in the day canceled him and did not allow him to be on there because of his following. He had a crazy following of people that were essentially following Andrew, and he kind of gives a lifestyle that's very interesting. It's very, we make money, we have money, we sell these products, we sell these self-help things. He's a kickboxing champion, some other stuff. So it's very hyper alpha male type stuff, very much like promiscuity and hypercars and the whole 9 yards. So very, very interesting. Tristan being part of that. And these guys kind of coming out of, a history and a thought process that would say, oh, actually, we're living in these, East Soviet bloc countries. We're doing this stuff. We have all these women around us. Andrew kind of went from, they're kind of loosely Christian in some way. Andrew became Muslim, whereas Tristan actually went back the other way and more into his faith. And it's been very interesting for them to dialogue. And he's talking with Bryce about that on this podcast. That was very insightful, Javen. You've seen these guys, you know who they are in reference to them. What was kind of your take in hearing him talk about some of that, about his faith in God?
Yeah, I mean, both their journeys across these last 4 years have been very interesting because they kind of started, like you were saying, where they were wrapped up in all this cam girl stuff that was going on, and that was like the majority of what their business was, and why like so many people were interested in whether or not it was basically human trafficking and things like that. And that was like a whole debacle and debate by itself.
Arrested for it?
Both of them were arrested and served time in prison in Romania. And then they both got out.
Yeah, they were never convicted. It was just holding them.
Yeah, exactly. And then they got out. And then I think now they kind of just bounce around all over the place.
Dubai,
besides Romania, obviously. But yeah, it's been very interesting. I also saw, I think the clip that you're talking about where I want to say it was around Christmas. I think both of them were actually attending like an Orthodox church service. And I think Andrew himself actually seemed pretty happy and like pretty adamant about going.
That's interesting.
Which is interesting because as far as I understand, both of them have always kind of been on some sort of understanding of a religious sphere that revolves kind of around, what's the term for it? As far as like the Judeo-Christian sphere of like understanding of how it works. Abrahamic religions. And it's been very interesting because I think their actual values and how they live their life, especially over this last like year and a half to 2 years, maybe not so much before, but as far as like they're kind of transitioned into really stepping in and becoming like parents for their children, have definitely reflected more values centered around like family, understanding who you are and stepping in your responsibilities as a man and what that means to be a provider, what it means to serve for other people. And I think, especially watching Tristan, it's been really interesting because after coming out of all this stuff, Tristan has really stepped into his responsibility as a father, but also heavily leaned into his understanding of what it means to really become a Christian. And I don't know necessarily how his faith journey is as far as like baptism and things like that, but even just to see that thought process and really like stepping into a real interest in understanding like things like marriage that he was talking with Bryce about is super, super important because once you start to really ask those big questions and kind of go from point A to point B and then to point C, any progress towards Christ is great. So I hope that really is a massive step that they're both continuing to commit and that we kind of see the same progression for his brother as well.
Yeah, it's powerful too. see them talking about these things with intentionality. One of the things that Tristan brought up, which is actually in alignment with how the church functions, the Christian church functions in Europe, is that you do religious ceremony as a pastor. In America, it's different. You actually can hold both pieces. So if you go and marry is somebody who is a reverend that has that ordination, you seen as certified with the state as someone who can perform marriages. It's a ministers can do that, boat captains. There's a few people within America that allow them to do that, not just a judge. And so for the government to be married, you can go before justice of the peace, a judge, and get married in that way. You can go and have someone do it that's ordained. Myself can go do those, or someone who owns, who has papers like Angus can do that. And so we have all these weddings that we've done, and we perform those weddings for people. When we were in Europe, it's different. There's no legality to it. What I'm doing is a religious ceremony. So you are getting married. You have to go and actually go to the state to be legally married in front of the state. But what we're doing is religious ceremony. So no one can tell you what to do as far as a religious ceremony. That's religious right. So someone can't come in like there's been a lot of stuff in the States where it's like, oh, you have to do this because, I'm protected by the state. They say I can get married to whoever I want, to same sex or to a goat, whoever you want to marry. They can, they can do whatever they want. In America, it's very, very open. Whereas in other places, they're like, no, they can't make you as a religious person do a religious ceremony for another person. That's not a thing. That goes against my rights. And so Tristan, speaking to that effect, he said, listen, I don't think the government should be in your marriage at all. Yeah. He's like, into that end, he's right from that perspective, in that, getting married in front of the government doesn't validate you as getting married in front of God. And so we've kind of seen those as like interchangeable, but they're not. And so we've seen how it's very much like we would say is like, hey, if you want to go and get married on, before the government on paper, you can. We'll do your ceremony on this day. And so we would have that agreement together. And it's interesting because it makes it much more sacred, like in a different way, because they don't have to go do that to be legal. No, they're doing that in intentionality. And so I did lots of ceremonies when we lived in France. And it was for that reason, because there was no legality to it as far as I do. We're doing it before God. And Tristan was saying in his interview with Bryce about how that's the one that counts. That's how he sees it. And I agree that is the way to see it. What do you think, man? You've done lots of weddings.
Yeah, I agree too. Honestly, I hadn't even really thought about the correlation between government and, registering and all of that with the government. It's different, definitely an interesting thought process and all that. Because here in the States, when you get married, there are tax benefits that come, and that shouldn't necessarily be a consideration or a part of your marriage and those kinds of things. And so I think that, regardless of whether you decide to register with the state or not, it really is important that, if you're living with somebody, or that if you're going to take it to that next level, that you, at the very least, do it in God's eyes. Amen.
Yeah, that's always been our heart. We've had people who kind of jumped the gun and went off and eloped and just like went to the JP and did that. And our heart with them was always, listen, it was never about being legal. That's never been our heart. Our heart is, have you made this commitment to each other before God? That's the important one. And so that's been the real deciding factor. And we talk to people about that all the time. I think I also agree because, the government can say that any people or any entities can be married, whereas that's not how it has been faith. So to be married in faith is a completely different story. I'll give you a counter to that. Was that I had a friend who's a Christ follower. We lived in Egypt. They had a difficult situation where they were getting a divorce, and they were both Westerners, both had been Christians in the past, and their spouse had been unfaithful. And so their spouse was also not willing to divorce them. They wanted them to go and do all the process. And the person I was talking with, his rights as in a Muslim country is that if you say that you're Muslim, all you have to do is tell your wife you're divorced, and you are legally. That's how it works. And so he said, he comes to me as his pastor, and he says, "You're my pastor." I said, "I know." And he said, "As my pastor, this is where I'm at." I said, "I understand." And he said, if I say this and I say this on paper, I don't believe it in my heart, but if I say it on paper, then I can just tell her we're divorced and we're done. And then everything's done. Like it's just done. And then the country back home will honor it. And I said to my friend, I said, "Hey, are you a Christ follower or not? Because if you deny me for a man, I deny you for the Father." It's Jesus' words, not mine.
Yeah.
And he said, "I am." I said, "Then I would follow Christ." And so he had to jump through a whole bunch of hoops, come back to the States, deal with all sorts of stuff, cost him lots and lots of money to do this thing, and time and energy. because his now ex-wife, he's married to somebody else, they have kids. She's married to two other people later, is married to somebody else, has kids. That whole process was super ugly, but he did the right path. And I honor him for it because, man, what a hard thing to do. But he did that because he wanted to make things right and he wanted to move forward. Once that had happened, I told him, he was like, I'm trying to do this as unto God. I am interested in this other woman. You know, obviously that she's moved on. She's with someone else actively, even though we're still married on paper. I said, I hear you. I said, I would suggest to you that before you make any commitment to this new relationship, that you finalize this other one. And he did. He did it the right way, did it in the right order. And so from my perspective, there was nothing holding on from the previous situation because he did it right before God. So it's interesting to hear the source of this come back to somebody like Tristan, who's kind of known. He's a good-looking guy, very athletic. You know, they're fighters. They're all this. I mean, like competitive fighters. Like they're very like that. Those guys, rich guys. You know, very much womanizers.
Yeah.
To hear them talk about a different mind shift and a change. So very interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it makes me think if you're doing it strictly for the governmental benefits and all of that, there's very little stopgaps to keep you from making a mistake.
Right.
You know, and so like here at Cornerstone, before we agree to perform a ceremony, we go through a process called SYMBIS, which is saving your marriage before it starts. And, you know, I always tell anybody who's interested in pursuing marriage that, you know, in my mind, it's no longer an option.
Right.
I mean, and here, based on our how we do things, it isn't an option. If you want to go through us, this is the process. And, you know, that I counseled a couple where as they were going through SYMBIS, because it talks about all of the different things that come up in your marriage, you know, they realized we're not right for each other or we're not in the right place in our life to pursue this.
Right.
But with others, you know, I tell people all the time when I'm explaining what it is, man, if I had this program before I got married, it would have saved the first 7 years worth of arguments.
Right.
Because we would have known these things about each other. I would have had some kind of clue as to how broken I was entering in. And same with Annie. She would have known how broken I was in these different areas. And that could have been something that we worked on instead of fought over. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's also so important is because you've got somebody else who cares about you. The government really doesn't care. I mean, they're going to get their fee on the piece of paper regardless. And so so they don't care what your state is because, in fact, they make more money if you don't stay together because then you got to pay for the divorces and all those things. Whereas when you partner with a pastor or a religious figure in that way, they have you've got somebody to pray with you, somebody to help counsel you through those tough things, and somebody who's rooting for you.
Right.
You know, and so I think that it's so important. It is way more than just going down and getting a piece of paper signed.
I agree. You know, we've been talking about and praying for families in our community of faith and many others that I've been talking to. That has been a commonality of the attack on the family, especially intimacy within marriages. And we see a lot of infidelity stemming from the lack of intimacy between the husband and wife, between their marriage, where they've allowed themselves to get into a roommate situation instead of being partners and being intimate with each other in their marriage. And because of that, it's opened the door for them to be unfaithful. And so we've talked about that, and that's actually been fairly rampant. We had all sorts of situations that we've been talking with people about, and they've been navigating that. It's super tough, man. It breaks my heart every time. Obviously, it's going to have an impact on the kids. It's going to have an impact on all sorts of things. And even in cases where people haven't been unfaithful, the lack of intimacy has essentially set them against each other. And so, man, it hurts my heart because we want people to, live free, live full of passion for each other inside the context of marriage, like be passionate for each other, enjoy each other, all of those things. Those are good things. That's how God created us to be. But man, if it gets out of sync, then it opens up the door for all sorts of badness to happen. And we've seen that so much. So, you know, it's a fight. It's a fight to continue to date your wife. It's a fight to be those that are intentional towards each other and not just, you know, putting every single spare moment into an activity for the children or activity to busy yourself. No, it's like we have to make space and time for each other too, because without that, man, it's going to be a mess. It's going to fall apart. So the Lord help us and help others as we be those that have a heart after him to really, that commitment to live for God.
Amen.
One of the things we've seen is people using their testimony. We have the nations coming to America for World Cup. Pretty amazing. You guys excited about soccer, Javo?
I'm honestly, at first I wasn't really excited because I thought the U.S. was not going to be that good of a host for it. But I think just the actual level of competition this year, considering how fired up all these countries are to actually win it, it's about to be gas, especially the knockout stages. I don't like. Maybe we'll get like a few cool upsets in the group stages, but I'm really excited for the knockouts and pass. So.
You and I had a chance to go to World Cup in Qatar.
Yeah,
and it's very interesting. A very small country. Yep. Almost all the games were played in Doha or adjacent to Doha. Yeah. So you could literally go to 2-3 games in a day if you had the real ability to do so. Yeah. Man, it was crazy. The whole city was doing the thing. That's what they were doing. It was packed. It was awesome. This one is spread out across 3 countries. A lot different. Because we had participated in the other one, I looked at tickets that they offered me in the early round. The first round were like $2,000 each. Yeah. Not going. Because even for me and Javen to go to one game, now we went to 4 games last time. You can get tickets for like a couple $100, which is like paying money, but it's not like that. I mean, that's not even close.
Yeah.
For all the tickets, I think that we did last time were like a fraction of what one ticket would have been for us to go to the game in LA.
So crazy.
Plus travel, plus all the crazy amount of anything it's going to be for anything. Even if we're driving our own car, even to get a hotel. It'd be a nightmare. Yeah. So you're going to spend $1,000. So I'm looking into that. I was like, ooh, I'd love to go, but it's just, it's outside of reach this time. But we're going to cheer for them. But what things I love is the testimony of they're showing these guys arriving to their training sessions in Canada, in Mexico, in the US. And we have people like Curacao and other nations, man. They're like worshiping. They're like doing a worship dance and worshiping, singing praises to the Lord in the locker room. Yeah. Pretty cool. Angus, did you get a chance to see it?
No, I haven't seen that. And, I'm excited. You guys are excited.
Thanks, man.
So it's not one of those things I necessarily follow, but it will be nice to have the games going on in our relative time zone.
That's true.
So there's more of a shot that I'll probably tune in and check out at least a couple of games because it's not in the middle of the night or, happening on the other side of the world.
Yeah.
But I do think that it's really cool, and we've talked about it in previous podcasts, how people are going public with their faith and they're just allowing themselves to express freely their beliefs. And I think that that's really cool. That's what gets me excited about it.
That's awesome. Yeah. We cheer USA. Obviously it's where we're from. We love America, pray for America. We also cheer France, and Javen is showing his shirt. There it is. So we cheer France. We lived in France. We cheer Egypt, Yalla Masr. Yeah. And so want to see them thrive as well and do well. And so, man, got kitted out. Me and Javen got a USA kit for this. We already have a bunch of kit over time. Now he's grown out of all of his, and I'm trying not to grow out of any of mine. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's been good. And so we got the new USA kit. Javen's run the new France kit. It's got the double stars for them winning the 2 World Cups.
So pretty, dude.
Just pretty cool. That's actually
Statue of Liberty colors.
Statue of Liberty colors, because they gave Statue of Liberty to us. And so that's supposed to be like the oxidized Statue of Liberty colorway.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Pretty awesome. And then you also got the Egypt one.
Yeah, the Egypt one's cool.
It's got a ton of stars, but that's from
Africa
Cup,
African Cup. Yeah,
which they've won a good ton of times.
Oh yeah, they've won it. I think it's like 7 times. Something ridiculous. Yeah, they dominated like year after year after year, and then now Salah's gonna retire, so they might plummet down the drain.
You never know. There could be another one. It could be some young guns coming up.
Morocco's on the up right now. I know they technically won it on paper, but it should have been Senegal.
It should have been Senegal.
Yeah, it should have been Senegal.
Oof, I know it's another thing, and we're talking about stuff that Angus doesn't care about.
All
right.
Well, I do. The one thing that it does bring to mind, though, especially with what we were talking about earlier, is that we need to be praying for the cities that are hosting.
100%.
That we don't see the same repeat of history that just happened in France. And so I think that's one of those areas that even if you're not interested in it as a Christian, you should be interested in the cities and the people, because there's a lot of focus that comes with this, and so the world's attention will be on these various cities, and so with that there can be a lot of darkness if we don't lift up our light.
Yeah, so often, and when it's big sporting events, Super Bowl is notorious for this, NBA Finals is notorious for human trafficking, for prostitution, all those other things on the rise. So yeah, pray against that and pray against the darkness to be there. Absolutely. Yeah. One of the things we have seen is we've been talking about Bryce. He's one of those Christian influencers. I know George Janko, other people that of faith, having and talked about that on their podcasts, talking about that in the sphere they put out there on social media. You guys have seen this and come across this. Javen, what do you think has been the most impactful for you of these Christian influencers?
Oh, like which one of them, or like
which one, or
conceptually?
Like, conceptually.
I think Cliff and Stuart Connectley have been extremely profound, and like a bunch of people kind of coming to understand the logical thought process behind breaking down Christian arguments and things like that.
Yes.
But also the history and kind of the science that also plays into different interpretations of the Old Testament and things like that, that forever have been like, oh, well, the Bible says that it was like actually made like this and this. And it's like, well, if you really think about it, and it's like the breakdown of,
breakdown,
exactly. The historical or the actual scientific breakdown and the like loose terminology behind some of what is contained, especially within Genesis, is actually applicable to scientific studies that we find, which is super cool. And I just love the fact that they've been super level-headed about everything, and that they've been super consistent over like these last essentially 15 to 20 years in doing so. Like he was doing it back when everybody was recording on like camcorders and stuff like that. It's super cool. And now his son's doing it alongside him, and that's awesome to hear. Especially with and alongside that, you get like Bryce and all these other people that are of the younger generation. They're like super just on fire for the idea of missions, especially within a domestic context, which is something that I think a lot of people oversee, because everybody's like, oh, I mean, if you're in America, we're the base that everything launches out of. We should be okay, right? But it's like, no, amongst some of our own people, we're actually the most lost. And then you look at the news right now, and then that also seems to confirm everything that's going on. I love their heart as far as the intentionality of what it means to really spread the gospel, and also live the consistency and have everything in your life reflect what you're saying out of your tongue, which is something that has been huge for a lot of them in propelling the younger generation to do that, even though now we have access to literally anything that could just instantly fire our dopamine, whether that be like a vape or a phone, or even like weed or drinking. Like getting anything on your hands is extremely easy nowadays. But the fact that they are challenging everybody to stay consistent and really live after what they're posting on social media and stuff like that is super cool. And I think that's been the biggest positive out of everything that we've continued to see from it.
It's cool. I really like seeing Cliff was here at ASU, and the school you go to that he is part of. And so got invited by Chi Alpha to come and be a part of that. Chi Alpha is a student ministry that's on many college campuses across the U.S., internationally. One More Friend, other things like that are part of that same kind of concept. Very much similar to what you might see as InterVarsity, some of these others, like, athletes kind of things where they're Christ followers, and that's kind of been their focus. So they have them invite these other guys to come and talk, and they'll break it down. People will make accusatory statements like, oh, it's a Western thought process Christianity, and guys will break it down. They're like, no, it's not. It's from the Middle East. It's actually there. It's like it wasn't dictated to anybody, and how Christianity actually came, in some cases, the missionaries were sent out of Africa into Europe and other places to spread the gospel. So it's pretty cool to see how the clarification of some of these things that have been taught wrong by non-Christians about Christianity is being set right in those things, and arguing for faith and being that light in the darkness. Angus, what's been your take for that? You've seen some of these social media guys.
Yeah, I think it's incredible that that there's such a following coming with these people, because it speaks to the hunger that's out there, especially in this upcoming generation that maybe wasn't previously there. And I think that that's great that there are people who are there to meet this generation where they're at, and so it makes it way more accessible, I think, just to people who maybe they grew up in homes that were not exposed to it. I think back to when I was in high school and stuff. If you claimed to be at least in my circle, if you claimed to be a Christian, that meant you weren't allowed to have fun or any of this stuff, and there were more rules than anything else. And what I like about this is, they're people, and they let people know that they're people, and it's not this holier than thou, and that's kind of how also I viewed Christians early on, was that they were just a bunch of judgmental people, and the church historically has a reputation for being full of judgmental people, and for these people to stand up, because Christians can be really mean.
Sure.
If you say something that doesn't align with their specific doctrine, all of a sudden you're a heretic and this and that, and so sometimes these people catch more hate from fellow believers than the people out in the world, which, that's a whole other conversation, and it's really sad. But I think that the fact that they're willing to stand up and just minister to the next generation in a way that they can receive is just incredible.
Yeah, and I think there's the attitude shift is talking about that. there's an attitude shift too that needs to happen, and that you can address something as you believe it's, that they're heretics, or it's heretical in that context, meaning that they're going against what the core tenets of faith are, and to speak to that in a dialogue way that makes sense instead of accusatory. And we've seen both versions of that within pastors or Christian circles or influencers even, and how they do that. So the Lord help us, man, to walk in unity with each other, to be together as the bride of Christ, as the people of faith, and to walk hand in hand in that way.
Yeah.
Amen.
One of the things that we see is another one of our C's is creativity. And we've been talking about AI, and we've been talking about robots and development of creativity in our current culture. One of the things that we see with AI and faith is how scientists, how they are helping people like Javan to find a Christian Shakira wife. And the way they're doing that is they have figured out the most attractive way for men to dance. Have you guys seen this?
Yes.
It's amazing. Javan, are you learning dance moves?
No, it's an absolute hoax. Watching the video, that is not how anybody is actually dancing. I think it's one of those things where like you get so many different responses and people are like doing dance moves, and then AI does one of those things where it's like, oh, well, if we just combine the mean or the average that everything's doing, then surely we get like a right answer. But nah, nobody's actually going out and dancing. The dude, like, I think he like takes 2 steps, does something weird with his hands. I'm like, bro, nobody's actually going out and doing this.
He kind of looks like, which I saw a kid do this, which is really funny. You know those things on the corner that are inflatable things?
Yes.
They throw their arms up and do the wave around?
Inflatable balloons.
There was a really viral clip I saw of a kid who's like, when you forget to order the inflatable guy for your store open, he's standing on a chair.
Oh,
he's
just doing it.
He's doing it. It is
That's
really
fire.
funny. People keep walking by and clapping, and they
That's
go in
really
because
funny.
he's doing all this stuff. He's like this, and he like points at the store, and then he does it
That's
again.
really funny.
And that's what made me laugh, because when I saw those dance moves, I was like, I don't know if this is going to really help Javan
No,
to get that Christian
it's not
Shakira
real.
he's looking
It's
for,
not
man.
real. No.
Because it says that these were AI combined from what women responded to say, oh, this is the most attractive kind of dancing. Angus, could you have used this dance moves to get Annie? What do you think,
In
man?
fact, I did.
Did you?
No, not really.
Oh, shout out. Bum, bum, bum. Shout out, Annie.
No, I still think the Carlton is probably the best.
The Carlton. Oh
fire.
my gosh.
That's moth to a flame when you can do the Carlton.
The Carlton.
Man.
Yeah.
Shout out millennial people who know what that is.
From the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Yeah.
Prince of Bel-Air.
It's really funny though. I think this is
Hilarious.
probably the first practical joke that AI is playing
Yeah.
on us.
Yeah.
See how many guys that he can, that AI can get to dance like this, and
Yes.
it's chatting with other bots, going, look at that silly human over there.
Should we learn this secretly and then bust it out on a Sunday as a surprise during our summer series?
I've already been studying it. It starts off with kind of a Running Man
Yeah,
sort
there
of
you go.
thing, and
Oh man, if you're listening to this somewhere and you're driving, do not attempt this while driving. I don't want you to crash into anybody, but if you're at the in safety of your own home, maybe you break it out. Clear a space, start practicing.
yeah, I see a life group on the horizon.
Life group.
I'm sorry, no, this is a men's dancing group only.
Learn to
No,
dance,
no
yeah,
women,
yeah.
no women allowed. We're being taught by AI. They're like, what is this church?
Just trying to get people connected, man.
You got to connect them, man. Connect, grow, serve. Come on. One of the people we talk about AI, and we don't have our resident anti-AI person with us engaged. But one of the people that recently was talking about this is the comedian Ronnie Chang. Now Ronnie is he's very kind of off the cuff. He's Asian descent, American guy, but he's very controversial. Did he go to Harvard? Do you know? He was speaking at at Harvard's. He was the speaker for their for one of their graduations, and he's doing the convocation or something. He rants, dude. He goes off on this rant about anti-AI. He's dropping cuss words, beep AI, all this, F this, that. He keeps saying it. Big pop from the crowd.
Yeah.
The Harvard graduates,
Yeah.
big yeah. Every time, dude, it's hilarious. You see a sea of PhDs sitting behind him, wearing all the regalia, and he's up there just dropping F-bombs on AI. And I think it's because all these people feel like they're not going to have a job because AI took all their jobs, and these are supposed to be, the cream to the creme kind of thing. What's your take on him dropping all these craziness?
One of the quotes that I saw that he said is AI will make mediocre people dumber, and I think that that's not wrong. It's
it's
going to make is going to make everybody, if we don't keep it in the right space, it's going to make everybody a little bit more stupid.
Oh yeah. That's true.
But I do, that is just one of the graduations that I've seen, but there are a lot of people are getting really fired up about AI at these graduation ceremonies, because these are the people that they've spent however many hundreds of thousands of dollars to get this certification that now AI is gunning for their jobs.
That's true.
And so there's a lot of talk right now in that space that AI kind of has to outlast humanity in this area, because humans are starting to realize, wait a minute, I'm going to be replaced. And so there's almost this early on revolt of people who are like, yeah, we need to we need to keep AI in its place so that we don't end up getting replaced. And there's a lot of very big reactions coming from, especially at these graduate spaces, where when the speaker speaks in favor of AI, they get booed.
Yeah.
And when people speak against AI, they get cheered. And it's, and business is going to do what business is going to do.
Right.
But at the same time, we have to. That's one of those areas that we have to stay united and of one mind. That AI is great in some cases and in some spaces, but if we lose sight of that and we allow it to take over, man, we're in trouble.
Yeah,
that's true. It actually parlays right into our next thing that we're talking about is AI fear. Now, there's a lot of fear around AI. We're not fear mongers. We do not fear. We trust in the Lord, so we're not going to be those that live in fear. But there are a lot of people that are spun up on fear. One of the things that Elon Musk was on Lex Fridman's podcast. Lex Fridman's a very popular podcaster, one of the biggest podcasts out there. He has a really different style in the way he asks questions. They're going back and forth talking about AI, and one of the things that was redacted from their conversation but was later reported in some of the notes that were attached to it was that a question was asked about, is there a point by which it's going to be too far to turn back on AI? And I think this was deleted, and essentially the report comes from another podcast, which was looking into this Lex Fridman podcast. They're saying that Elon took like a minute to gather his thoughts, and then he said, "Yeah, in 2027, if we're not careful, it's going to be the point of no return, where AI is going to start making decisions for everybody." This is very interesting, Jay. But what was your take on that? Kind of listening to that.
I mean, honestly, well, here's what I think. Right, in history, we have tended to have the wisest, most richest people have some sort of divine interaction with in some way. Okay. We see whatever with going on with his mom, and also potential reports of him engaging in some of this behavior as a child. And then we also see his line and history of investments and going alongside some of the most rich and powerful people within the world. And now he has more money than it's like if you were to save like $10,000 from the time you were like a caveman or something every day,
right.
You still wouldn't have as much money
Correct.
as this guy.
Yeah.
Or some crazy stat like that. So if a dude's taking a minute to answer and formerly sat on the cabinet with some of the most rich and powerful people in the world that are probably dumping all their money into this thing right now, I would probably listen to the guy whenever he's saying, oh, if by like midway through 2027, we kind of overly rely on AI for this and businesses are seemingly not pulling back from it, then there probably is something that should be done about it. So, I mean, I certainly think that his word and concern on that should be held to some high regard, especially if he's within the space that a lot of these other people like us would probably never understand as far as thought process goes. So it's one of those.
It's interesting because that is true. At the same time, Tesla is going to be one of the leading, animatronic robot people with AI on board. 100%. He has Grok. They run it now in Teslas. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yes, I'm a participant in this thing, but you should also be very afraid. I remember one of his earlier ones, even a couple of years ago, when talking with Joe Rogan, which is one of the biggest podcasts out, and Joe was freaked out. And Joe's not not really scared of much. I mean, UFC commentator and fighter guy and all stuff, and has that kind of independent money at this point from his Spotify deal that he doesn't have to listen to anybody. And Joe was looking at him like, "What did you just say?" And he was like, very fearful about what's going to happen. So really insightful like that.
Yeah.
I think it's Peter Tiel. We talked about him before. He's the billionaire investor, giving talks about the Antichrist, and we were talking about how they were sold out in San Francisco. He gave them in Rome as well, and I think some other places. One of the people is a comedian, Duncan Trussell. He was early on the Joe Rogan podcast all the time, still is a regular that comes on there several times a year. Duncan went and watched this talk by Peter, And he said that Peter is a believer in Christ, identifies as a Christian. Now he is gay, married to a man, and it is connected to some churches that are more on the very, very liberal side of that spectrum. But he's investing in tons of these other things and very much in AI. But Peter is saying that his perspective of revelation is that we can fight against the Antichrist by using AI and animatronic robots. What's your take on that, Jazz?
I'll have to go back and listen to that a little bit more and think about it. But that's not, I mean, I see it the other way. I think that AI really is lining up to be used as more of a tool for the beast and all of that stuff. I think there's a lot more connections because of the direction of the people who control it.
Yep.
And I think that that's really where it is. I mean, if the people who control AI are pushing for a certain agenda, that AI model is not going to necessarily go against its creators.
Correct.
And so unless we get more AI creators in that billionaire, trillionaire space, whatever, that are going the other way, I don't really see it. I mean, maybe a portion of it can be resistance, at some point. We may be like in the Terminator, where some of us pair up with the old Terminators to fight the new Terminators or whatever. Yeah. But I really, just the way things are lining up and the current climate, I don't necessarily see it as the AI being a resistance to the Antichrist and all of that.
Yeah, same. Jabo, what do you think?
Man, it's like, I don't know how anybody could fall for this when it's coming from the mouth of Peter Thiel, especially because what you're saying about like him being a self-proclaimed Christian yet living this entire different lifestyle, and then him essentially going in and saying, yeah, we can actually change the book of Revelation because it doesn't have to be like this, just completely slaps the face of everything that we're supposed to be as Christ followers. And it's also interesting when you get somebody that's really heavily in arms, as well as has a lot of people that are Jewish-backed investors all in favor of one world religion and accelerating a world war based on something in the Holy Land or something like that, then you start to ask a lot of questions as to why this guy is suddenly getting on that agenda that, oh no, this thing that all these people are investing a bunch of money into that is definitely not inherently anti-human. We should actually put all of our money and trust into as well, because it's a good idea in the long run.
To help protect us from the bad guys.
It's like, come on, dude. Like, you're not fooling anybody. So I actually side with Gage on this one. I think it's like, come on, bro. Like,
yeah, it's a tough one.
I could see more of that line of thinking being part of the Great Deception.
Yeah, exactly.
That it's like, no, it's okay. This is going to be what stops the Antichrist and all of this, and people are deceived into following that and realizing, wait a minute, never mind, it's all the same thing.
No, 100%.
Just a different vein.
For sure. And my prayer for Peter, for Duncan, who listened to him, for Danny Jones, who was interviewing Duncan about this, is that, I pray that they really do have a real revelation of Christ themselves personally. And that's my hope for Peter. That's my hope for people that he's connected to in his relationships, that there is not deception for them, that they really have a heart that's really after God. Now, maybe that's his heart. His thought is, oh, maybe I can do something about this, and I'm going to use my wealth and ingenuity to do something. I hope it's in that vein, and I hope it's not the other way around. But, man, heaven help us.
Yeah. Yep.
One of the things that we've seen that's cool is an advancing in technology, and this one has nothing to do with robots, has nothing to do with AI, but is very, very cool science. And that is something that's called a diving bell ship. And they've been using this for a while. I didn't realize how well they've developed it. A diving bell is something that has air pumped into it. Usually it'd be submerged. It could be a submerged area. It could be something that they set up where what it does is it allows you to go into it and actually disconnect from your diving rig so that you can breathe air underwater. So it's a room essentially that has no floor or a partial floor that water's pumped in, or air's pumped into it. It displaces the water out underneath it, and it's breathable in there, and you're able to interact and do those things. They have that now in such a way, with such a long telescoping arm, that it can telescope all the way to the bottom of the ocean, pump all the water out so that you can stand on the ocean floor with air and work in that area with no dive gear in the dry.
Yeah.
So crazy.
Super
Jabo,
cool.
You saw it?
Yeah, super dope. Like, just looking at the way that they use chambers and the fact that like it can press to a pretty low like footage as far as like underneath the actual sea
like
level.
How deep?
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty wild. Like, you think about how this kind of changes the game as far as like expeditions and things like that. If they really are interested, yeah, for sure. And I mean, that does obviously take some some complicated thinking with it, as far as like if we really wanted to go look at the Titanic and things like that. That's a pretty substantial way down there.
Yeah.
So I don't know about developing
deep,
a telescope or like a diving bell that far down, but if we can figure out something like that, or like a submarine version of what that would look like, it'd be really cool. And this is like essentially military grade technology that we had, I would say like 40 or something years ago, that's now just being used for like ship and oil rigs, which is really cool.
Yeah, also for all of the connectivity for our fiber optics under the ocean, fixing them. That's a real fight. That's part of the threat of what's happening right now in Iran, is they're threatening to cut all the undersea cables. There's been a lot of like that in the past with people tapping into cables and getting information that's been sent back and forth. So that's always a battle. So it's really interesting to see this being used in that way. Angus, what was your thought?
Yeah, it was a wild concept to watch these people walking, and it looks like they're walking on a riverbed with just a little bit of water, but to know that outside of that chamber is the ocean.
It's crazy.
And just having them walk down, and just the idea of being able to walk on the ocean floor is just a wild concept to me. 100%. But it's very cool, that you can go down and pick up history.
Yeah.
That there's history right there on the surface of things that you can just go down and pick it up now. And that's just wild stuff.
I say we put that bad boy in the Red Sea and go find us some chariot parts. What do you guys say?
100%. There you go. That would be really cool.
Go find that amazing Abraham story come about. It would be amazing.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be super, super cool. One of the things that we've also seen is the development of these new cities. One of these ideas is being developed right here in our backyard. We happen to be in Metro Phoenix on the west side of town. Now, the east side of town has been built out all the way to the native reservation that's there. That's where Scottsdale's at. So Scottsdale butts up against it. So south of that, it's still expanding out into the desert, taking on that, but eventually they'll run into another native tribe reservation down there as well. On the west side, however, it's open land that essentially goes almost all the way to the Arizona border, where there's a tribe that's on that side down I-10. But closer to us, adjacent to us, is where people come from. That are part of our church live there. Mm-hmm. It's called Buckeye, Arizona. It's one of the largest in Maricopa County. It's one of the largest cities besides Phoenix in its size, because they went out and strip annexed the whole desert because of all the development that's going to happen out there. Because of that, this is the place where Bill Gates has a ton of property and is developing stuff. Other billionaires are coming to do their Terravellis, we've talked about it, and these other ideas. One of the new ones that they're doing right now is actually not going to be for sale. It's going to be rental only.
Yeah.
And they are building 901 units that are going to be there in Buckeye. It's one of the largest developments of its kind outside of, I think Florida has the number one. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, going to be number 2 in size, but huge. And to think it's only rental.
Yeah.
Super crazy. What do you think, Angus?
I really don't like the idea. I mean, I know that there are people that they don't want to own a home. They don't want to own that stuff. And, and if that's your choice, that's great. But I think that developments and things like this just make it easier for it to be harder for the next generation to own. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And for those people in the next generation, we already see a huge disillusionment, and like Javan's age group and that, because why am I going to go to college and devote all of this time and money and all of that just so I can not own something,
right?
And so there's a lot of people that are really unhappy about that thing. I'm devastated about it for my kids. I would love for my kids to be able to own a property, and because there's a whole different mentality that comes when you own something versus it's somebody else's to maintain.
Right. Sure.
And in some places that can be great. In other places it's not. I mean, I lived in an apartment complex early on in our marriage. It was a brand new complex, but it was Section 8 housing.
Oh, yeah.
And, because now some apartment complexes, they'll stay great. And it's because of, the type of people who live there, because of the, the jobs that it requires in order to live there. But, we started out and the community was 3 years old. Within another 3 years of us moving out, you went back and it was almost unrecognizable because it was destroyed.
Really?
Because, these people who live there, that they didn't have to take care of it,
right.
But they also were not of the economic level where it, they can or care or whatever it is. And so, I just find that, when you own something, you take better care of it.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't like the idea of the next generation getting okay with the fact that, well, I'm just not going to own anything, because that goes along with the plans of 2030 and all of that, where you'll own nothing and be happy.
Right.
And this is just, that was the first thing I saw, is you'll own nothing and be happy.
Yeah.
And I don't like that concept, because at a certain point, they take away your ability to choose.
100%.
And I think it's going to be in alignment with what we saw in other places, right? Where they've done in Tempe or other places where I think in Tucson, they're doing these walkable areas, these walkable things where it's like more, it's designed more in the thought process of an old city, the way we think about it, where it's like, you're not going to have a car to do it. In Arizona, you have to have a vehicle to move around. It's very, very spread out. It's almost like completely suburbia once you get out of the urban core, and only just like a mile of other side down off Central, you have to have a car to get anywhere. It's very hard to get around by bus. It's not like in other cities. And so this would be a very interesting thing. I think they're going to give some benefits that people have been looking for, at the same time take away the very ownership of what it could be.
Well, and while there are benefits, the people who own, they ultimately get the most benefit.
Oh yeah, they're super wealthy.
All they have to do is build it, and then you're paying their mortgage.
Right.
And that's the thing, is, just because they had the money up front, now you're paying down their bill for the rest of your life.
Exactly.
What do you think, J-Bo? 900 units in Buckeye.
Nah, I'm with Angus on this one. I think like as far as a major populace goes, for the majority of the adult population, this kind of just contributes to 2030 plan for everybody to not own anything. The only way I could see this making any sort of sense is literally if they built like a 50,000 person college out there, where they needed that many college kids that were only ever going to come in and essentially be like a fresh, consistent stream of people that just wanted to rent for like
rentals.
a year or so and then get out. That's about the only way that ever makes sense as far as like justifying why that many rental homes are being made. But if it's just another community that they're retro planning like that, I mean, like, I think everybody, especially that's stepping into adulthood, can kind of see the glaring issues with that. Because if you don't own anything in the long run, the people that that originally built it, like Angus was saying, will just become extremely rich, do it again, and then more people are stuck in the same process. So
make a really big separation between those that have and those that don't.
Exactly.
Versus the middle class, which are owners, which, the higher, we know that the more middle class you have, the better your society does, because more ownership is there, more people are in that space. You do well all the way across the board. Examples of not having that and having the haves and the have-nots is places in developing countries. Yeah. You have very few elites that own everything, very, very wealthy, and then lots of people who are poor, paycheck to paycheck,
exactly,
hand to mouth as far as food goes. So it's one of those kind of things that, Lord help us, as we navigate these things, and even as they build this out, because it's running, it's going to happen. So it's like, how do we navigate? How do we reach those people for Christ? Amen. So the Lord help us to plant churches and to be effective with those guys.
Yeah.
Google is in the mosquito business. Yes, that's right. Google, the people that we use for all of our email and for all of our search and Gemini and whatnot, they are now releasing 32 million mosquitoes. And these mosquitoes are a concept that they're breeding these mosquitoes to be male mosquitoes to breed with female mosquitoes that are supposed to kill mosquito swarms. So it's like they're introducing people, like essentially ones that will kill the ability for those female mosquitoes to have active mosquitoes and kill these massive swarms, and they're being released into California and Florida. What do you think about that?
This actually makes me really angry.
Oh.
I don't like mosquitoes. I'm a very sweet person, and so like I get
so they come and attack you.
Myself, Quinn, my daughter, we get eaten alive by mosquitoes. So I'm not a fan by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
But I think we as people need to realize God put in ecosystems for a reason. And while yes, it sounds great, just the engineering of creation is, we see with the ticks that everything's going on right now. But while I may not like mosquitoes, they're a part of the food chain. And it's just like with all of the GMO stuff that has come out. When to introduce it because of pollination and the way nature works, at some point it will all be GMO. And if mosquitoes are not just going to stay in their city that they were dropped off in because that city has a problem.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, they're going to continue to spread across the country and across the world. And, you know, what happens to the birds and the bugs and everything that eat those mosquitoes is food. And, you know, the bugs that eat the other mosquitoes, the birds that eat the bugs.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a huge thing. And we're messing with things thinking that we're the smartest and greatest. And, you know, I mean, there's a lot of dystopian stuff that starts off this way,
100%.
you know, and so it really does frustrate me that I just saw this too, that June 5th, I think, is when public comment is closed on it. So like in 2 days is when from the airing of this, you know, that's when or the recording of this, that's when the public comment is closed. And if there's not enough opposition and whatnot to it, then they get to go ahead and do it. And I just don't like the idea of these billionaire companies and stuff like that doing whatever they want with our society, with our country, you know, with all of this. It really, really upsets me.
Yeah, the ticks in reference that Angus was talking about is tied to Bill Gates Foundation, that they developed these ticks that essentially will bite you and it will make you allergic to meat of any type. And so essentially is making you a vegetarian because you now can't process the proteins in the meat, and it makes you physically sick. And so once you get bit by these ticks, and so they're releasing them in the wild, or it's reported that they're releasing them in the wild. And so we've seen videos of people showing helicopters dropping them off in fields. There were farmers or ranchers or people, just landowners that own land, and they're seeing these like helicopters hovering over, dropping off these bundles. They're like, "What is this? This is my land, dude. You can't drop stuff on my land."
Yeah.
You know, I mean, thankfully they didn't, retaliate, like shoot the choppers out of this guy or something crazy. But you know, it wasn't like that. But this is what's being reported, is that they're trying to roll this stuff out to essentially change how people function.
Yeah.
I mean, dude, if I could no longer go get a burger or a steak, I'd be not excited.
No. Well, it's called alpha-gal. It is the disease that comes with those tick bites. And in fact, Gavin was asking last night because we had pork, and he said, "So does that mean that you can, if you have alpha-gal, can you still eat pork? Because is that a red meat?" And I said, "You know, let me look it up." And so I looked it up yesterday, and actually, it's any mammalian proteins or any mammalian food. So if it flies or if it swims, you can still eat it. But if it's, so pork, chicken, or pork and beef and all that kind of stuff, lamb, it makes you highly allergic to those things. And and there's no cure for it. They're saying that it can go into remission, but it's a lifelong allergy. And there are people, I saw this farmer in Martha's Vineyard, not to get too far off the mosquitoes thing, but in Martha's Vineyard, the farmers and stuff there are having to change their entire operations because I think it's like a third of people are coming in and have these concerns and stuff now. And, you know, it was a huge tourist destination, but not only are people scared to go there because they're going to get bit by ticks, but now in addition to being gluten friendly and this, they're having to label that they're alpha-gal friendly. And so, I mean, we're starting to see that in this space. And so what are the ramifications? You know, there's a bunch of people sitting around papers and numbers going, "Oh, this is a great idea."
Right.
But that's because they don't have to live with it.
Yeah. And I know they're trying to think about it from they're saying that's because the methane from cows is one of the major polluters of CO2. Instead of trying to address any of the pollution that's coming out of other countries and other places, they're doing that to our country here, which is an interesting take. Jay, what do you think about mosquitoes, ticks?
I'm not with it. Like, I understand the concerns for, especially in Florida, there's been a lot of talk with like disruption of wildlife that's been happening with like pythons that have come in that are not native to the U.S. whatsoever, as well as certain hornet breeds that are like killing a bunch of bee swarms and things like that because they imitate a queen bee and then like lead the hive astray, and then you get all these like hives that end up dying down. But I mean, there's no real justification for releasing that many mosquitoes. I understand if it's like in a controlled environment and you're trying to figure out like over time, it'd be like, oh yeah, over a 3 to 5 year span, we're just trying to figure out how this works and like we're containing it to this area. But it's like, they're just like, oh no, this is worked maybe once or twice in a lab. We're just going to release 32 million of these things in California and Florida. Hopefully there's no bad repercussions to any of this whatsoever.
Right.
So I'm totally with Angus on this. And yeah, the alpha-gal thing is also kind of crazy, but there's a whole bunch that goes with that, and with Bill Gates as an individual anyway.
Yeah, it's hard because you feel like you need to have your tinfoil hat on for some of this stuff. You're like, this is a bunch of like theorist concept, but it's like, no, this is stuff is happening. This is stuff is being released on the normal news media. So, it's not something that we're cleaning off the web in some corner, like this is something else altogether.
And the justification that they're using for these mosquitoes is that they're going to be releasing them only in cities that have high incidence of mosquito-borne diseases, and so it's because they're trying to help people to not get sick. Well, why don't we treat the sickness that's coming as a result of that instead of
they don't want that because they want to have a drug to sell to them.
Yeah,
it's a problem.
Exactly.
Hey, changing topics a little bit here. Something fun that I thought was cool. We talked about sticking out your tongue for 40 seconds to kill some of your anxiety. One of these things that people are talking about is hacks. This is a parental hack, and it comes from Chase Hughes. He's somebody who deals with interrogations. He deals with that type of stuff within the police, within the military, within a lot of those things. It's testing on how people interact and how they respond to these processes. And one of the things I thought was really funny is that he uses it on his own kids. Now, Chris is one of these people that he's trying to break it down. So he brings this question up. He was on a podcast and giving the answer. He said, the best question to catch a guilty kid is ask them, what should the punishment be for these actions or this crime? And it was hilarious. He's saying whoever says there should be a light punishment, that's the person that's guilty.
Yeah.
So in his case, he's telling a story about his daughter and his son and how they spilled chocolate milk on a rug, and he said, who did this? And neither of them said it was me. They're like, oh, it wasn't me. So he separates them. So he was immediately doing the tactics that they do is separate them. Get the stories. The daughter's like, he's like, what do you think it should be? She's like, oh, I think that they should. And it's like all the super hard punishment. Like, they should never allowed to have milk again, and they should, get their Xbox taken away for a year. The craziness. Then he goes to his son. He's like, what do you think the punishment should be? He's like, maybe they shouldn't have chocolate milk in the room anymore. It's like very lightweight, like no punishment. He's like, you're the guy. So I thought that was very, very clever. So shout out to parents out there who are going to be using this on their kids or grandkids to get to the root of the issue. What do you think, Javen? Would that have worked on you?
I don't know, man. What this instantly brought me actually to thinking about was David and the prophet Nathan, because it's like whenever Nathan tells him about like the ewe and about like the poor man and the rich man and how still the rich man used the poor man's ewe, he was like, oh yeah, surely he died for that, right? And then he was like, David, I'm talking about you.
Right.
And he's like, oh shoot. Like I was thinking about that. Like if there really is a vindictive kid that just is really good at kind of reading into people, I don't know that necessarily has it definitely doesn't have a 100% success rate, but I'd be interested to see, especially among kids who are generally pretty impressionable, how many of them would be willing to tell or at least like indicate that they were the person that did that subconsciously instead of just being very good at masking. Because I felt like over time, kids have kind of developed more of a skill for that now, just because of the way that the world works. It's like people are almost being hardened again in some way. So I don't know.
Oh, that's an interesting take, actually. I didn't think about it that perspective. He says that it works very well. It's something that they use as a tactic with people, especially to try to get them to admit guilt.
Yeah.
So you're saying that it could be people who are kind of hyper intelligent there, or in that way, like David was a ruler. He's a king.
100%. Yeah.
He's governing over people, obviously said to be very, very gifted and all these things, and courageous and a warrior.
Yeah.
So you're saying no, he was like trying to double down on his public holiness, maybe?
Yeah, and I mean that's like an adult, so that's also kind of something else that I feel like retracts from the study for the kids.
Chase says it works on adults. So he says it'll definitely work on kids, but it doesn't work on adults.
I feel like for kids, it's probably definitely true. For adults, it might depend on demographic. It might depend on culture. Maybe, I don't know. I think there's a lot of factors that play into it more so than like on the surface it would work like XYZ amount of time. So I don't know. But that's the way I think about it, so.
One of the C's that we talk about is competence, and one of the things that we want to highlight today is a book called Live Dead Joy. It comes from Dr. Dick Brogden, and it's actually a daily devotional reader. It's focused on praying for unreached people and about how we live for God. So it is a daily devotional for you in your spiritual walk, but also is one of those ones that prompts us to pray for the unreached, especially unreached people groups, UPGs. And in the Christian sphere, especially the missional focus that we've been involved in for many years and supporter of now as a church, we very much pray for unreached people groups, that they would have a true witness of who Christ is, and that there would be people that go and serve them, as well as the concept of abandoning our ambitions to go after the thing that God has for us. That's the idea of the live dead. So you live dead to yourself, dead to sin, alive in Christ, as we talk about. And what that means is that we're going to be willing to go to difficult places to be the light in the darkness spiritually. So it's a really good reader. I know, Angus, I've given you a copy of it before. Jabo, Uncle Dick, Dr. Dick Brogdon. He's been a mentor to me and spoken into Jabin's life as well. We spent some time together in some different places. We were talking about it yesterday as we were driving back from California. You're like, yeah, you spent time with him. It was like in 4 continents.
Yeah,
which is
crazy.
Hilarious. I didn't realize that's true, but we just had dinner with he and Jen recently here in Arizona when they were here. We've been with them in Europe. We've been with them in the Middle East, been with them in Africa, been with them in Asia. And you're like, oh yeah, I really have been with them in a lot of places. For real, spent a lot of time. So Angus, what's been your take? Love Dead Joy.
I think that, the more you pray for people who are unreached, the more you have a heart for them. And so like, I think about even just our homeless population around here,
good.
As it gets hot, you see people just kind of wandering from shade to shade. And, this week I was out to go pick up food for our pantry at the Mercy House. And I really noticed, especially because it's getting hotter, I just noticed the amount of people that are homeless and that are just on the street corners. And just how thankful I'm not there having to get my daily bread from the kindness of other people and wait for 8 to 12 hours out in the heat. But
that's right.
But the reality is God doesn't call any of us to be, wanderers and like that. And so it really, even though there are unreached peoples around the world, there's a lot of unreached people here in our context. And the summertime, for whatever reason, maybe it's because it's hot and my aversion to the heat, that I really begin to think about that. And I just, it gives you a heart to pray for them. And, I used to be more judgmental towards that, and thought, well, why can't they just get their lives together and this or that?
Right.
But the more you work with people in that space, you really begin to develop a heart for them and realize some of them are out there because of no fault of their own.
Right.
Exactly.
Just like those unreached peoples, they're unreached through no fault of their own. It's just because they were born in this country or that country. And so I think that it really helps you to develop a heart for people.
That's really good. Javen, you know about the focus of the book and having the joy of the Lord, even despite persecution, despite difficulty. What's been your take with Live Dead and with Uncle Dick, the writings from there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm totally with Angus on this one. Like, for us, especially having lived across the world, we've seen all types of people in pretty much any form you can think of. And a lot of times when people say missions, especially in a Western context, you're thinking about going to like the farthest edge of Africa. And it's not to take away from those people because they're just as valuable underneath the eyes of God. But to Angus's point, especially with missions and like missions dedication in AG, sometimes people spend so much time looking out at everything that's around them, then they don't see what's at their feet. They don't see the people right around them in their community.
It's good.
And it's just really, it's really saddening because like yesterday, even when we were about to turn, I think right off of Buller to get to our house, there was a homeless woman that was like right in the corner. And obviously this year it's been a little bit better, like inclement weather condition wise for them, as like they haven't really had to have like a crazy hot summer, haven't really had to have like a really cold winter
yet.
But even then, exactly. Something else is on the horizon. It still doesn't negate the fact that they're without a home. Sometimes they're without human contact for days just because people will pass by them and dismiss them the same way that the average driver would. So it is really sad. And it does really give us a heart to think about the communities that we have around us, whether it be like Avondale, Buckeye, Goodyear, Litchfield Park, Cashin, and it also gives you an appreciation for the things that we have, not only within our own church, but even within outreaches like Mercy House. And you think about how that is just as much of missions work to a local community of people that are still unreached in the same way than somebody else that's going to like North Sentinel Island if you really want. So
yeah, and I think there is an argument for access, meaning the people here would have more access than other people across the world. But I think reading behind something like this, it's a parallel. It brings you to the scripture, not away from it. So you use the scripture every day and has that as the catalyst for us to read and to reflect about what God wants us to do in praying for others. So to bring it back to Live Dead Joy, I think it's one of those things that it can be a real blessing to you. So if you're listening to this, let that be something that you would go and pick up and let it be a blessing to you. But then apply it in your own life as you're driving around. We were coming back from a road trip. We happened to have some snacks with us. We were able to hand them off to a woman that was there right at the corner of Litchfield. And that didn't no sweat off of us, man. We had more snack. You know what I mean? We had more water at the house. We were able to give whatever we had, and it wasn't taken away from us necessarily. But a game changer for her to have like a cold water and something to eat. You know what I mean? And so it's not that we were saving the day in any way, but the idea is that collectively we can have more of an impact. That's what Mercy House is about. You know, Angus, you and Dave and others every single week or every other week are going and getting food for the Mercy House so that we can give and help. You know, I think our record's like 60, 65 families that have a whole bunch of food that they can have as a resource whenever they didn't have the food, or they're out of food stamps or out of this other stuff, or maybe they didn't qualify. And now they're able to have some sustenance. So it makes a big difference, but that's intentional. We're doing a lot of activities to make that happen.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's really cool. And you know, in my role, I really just go help and retrieve the food. And there's a whole team that, because of my schedule versus when they do it, you know, this other team, you know, they put together food bags. And so they really get to, so, I mean, I have a very little part of it as far as I'm concerned, but it's really neat to have a hand in it. But you know, I mean, our people who've gone out and handed out bags to the homeless, they've taken Narcan with them, and there's a guy who was ODing on the street and is alive because this group of our brothers and sisters here at Cornerstone have a heart to go out and reach the community, and so that's really powerful to know that, you know, as people support us, we can support those who go out and support others, and it's really cool to just be a part in the chain, you know, a link in the chain.
Yeah, amen. I mean, it's not just going and praying for people. We're definitely doing that, believe in the power of that, but also physically giving them food to eat, you know, maybe water. We have a water station set up. What Mercy House is something that we're committed to and part of in our community here. And that's one of the things that even our local government, Avondale, has given a grant to Mercy House because water is available for the unhoused population. It's a place where they can get some shade, they can get some water, get out of the heat for a second and do that. And so the Lord help us, man, to apply something like Live Dead Joy to ourselves, to across the world, support that work, but also support the work right where we are.
Amen.
One word to leave the podcast. Javan.
Missional.
Angus. Awareness.
I'm going to say Pentecost. Hey, God bless you. Thank you so much for being a part of the collective. Much love to you wherever you are.